Got it. Okay. Erev Tov, Chodesh Tov. Rosh Chodesh tonight. Yeah. Tonight and tomorrow night. So last night we started talking a little bit about Sefira Omer. That number of questions will come up. The person forgets to count. The person can't remember when they counted the wrong day. Not sure. The truth is, here it's less when you're davening Bisman with a MIncha Maariv every night, so it's much easier to remember. Obviously, we have Friday nights, we have the early MIncha. But when you're in places I mentioned before, I mean London, for example, or Manchester or Scotland, I don't know why you want to live in Scotland, but other places like that where it gets late, it gets dark very, very late, and just about everybody davens Maariv before it's dark. So you have to remember to count sefira later on by yourself, so it gets harder. So people forget, or you make a mistake. It happens. So we said yesterday, two conflicting ideas, two machlokot which come out regarding how we relate to the word in the pasuk of Tmimot, Sheva Shabbatot Tmimot. So there's the Bahag, who says that Sheva Shabbat, because it says Sheva Shabbatot Tmimot, and has to be 7 complete weeks, that the count has to be complete, i.e. you have to count every single day, every single night. And therefore, if you missed a day, there was one day that you did not count. Or if you counted the wrong day, which is exactly the same as not counting, then according to Bahag, you can no longer count the days of the Omer. We said most of the Rishonim do not hold that way. Shulchan Aruch does not hold that way, and that's why we say, out of deference to Bahag, if you missed a day, you would not say a bracha. We're worried about a bracha levatala. However, one would still have to continue counting the next night without a bracha, or you hear the bracha from the Chazan and you answer Amen. That one can still fulfill the mitzvah without saying the bracha. So that is one. That was one understanding. The other understanding of Tmimot is that it refers not to the entire unit, but it refers to each day. And each day the count has to be Tmimot, has to be complete. In other words, if I start counting the day halfway through the day, start counting in the daytime hours, that doesn't count. That's what Tosfot says. You have to count at night. The Bahag, as a Chumra Nakula, the Bahag who says you have to count every single day, you can't skip a day. But he also says that you could count during the day, right? He says you could count at night or during the day, it's okay. Based on, there's a bit of a stira, there's two different marot. One seems to imply you can count during the day, one implies you can't. In any event, but that is the machloket, whether you can count during the day or not. Bahag says yes, and again, according to Bahag, would be with a bracha. One forgot to count at night, according to him, you would count the next day with a bracha. Again, we don't want to, now the other side, we're worried about a bracha levatala, and therefore, if one forgot to count at night, you would not say a bracha the following day. However, you would, if you remember during the day, you would count during the day for that day which you forgot. And then the next night, you can continue counting with the bracha. Again, we said it's a mima nafsha. Person forgot one night to count and made up the count the following day. Right? Let's say last night I didn't count the Sefira Omer, I didn't count the shul, or I forgot, I was asleep, whatever. And then I remembered in the morning. So in the morning I said, today is 14 days of the Omer. That's what we counted last night. Then the following night, you can say the bracha again. Because if we say the halacha is like Tosfot, that even if you missed the day, you can still count to the bracha. Okay, you missed the day, you can still count to the bracha. If the halacha is like Bahag, who says that you can count during the day, so you haven't missed the day because you counted during the day. So whatever happens, you're okay. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Now the next case is, what if a person can't remember if they counted or not? Right, a person is misupak. You have maybe I counted last night, maybe I didn't. Or, again, maybe I counted the right number, or maybe I didn't. Right? You get to the count, and the Chazan says 14. You say, wait a minute, I counted 14 last night, or I counted 12 last night. Whatever, you can't remember. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Im shachach levarech bechad hayamim, this was the case we just discussed, right? Im shachach levarech be'echad me'ayamim, ben yom rishon ben misha yamim, sofer b'sha yamim, below bracha. You completely forgot a day, you would then continue counting without a bracha. Aval, im hu mesupak, im dileg yom echad ve'lo safar. You can't remember, you're not sure if you skipped today and didn't count or not. So then, yispor b'sha yamim b'bracha. In this case, I can continue counting with a bracha. I don't have to be concerned. Why is that? He said, if you know for sure that you missed a day, you completely missed a day, you can no longer say the bracha. Yeah, but you may have missed a day, you can still continue, and you should still continue counting with the bracha. So says Mishnah Berurah. He says, the Ika Sveik Sveika. We have a Sveik Sveika here. There are two Sveikot. What are they? Number one, Shema lo dilei klal. Again, you're not sure if you counted yesterday. So maybe you did count. And if you did count, then there's certainly no problem. You can carry on counting. The imtim say lomar shedileg. And even if you forgot, even if you missed a day, Shema halacha kotan poskim to kol yomu mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. Right? Maybe even if I missed a day, the halacha is not like Bahag. The halacha is like everybody else who says, even if you missed a day, you can still carry on counting. And therefore, that is the sefika, and therefore you can carry on counting. That's how the Mishnah Berurah learns based on the Pri Chadash. Now that's one understanding. There is a different way of understanding this, which is the Ktav Sofer, who says this is not a sfeik at all. But what we're really saying is this. He says, why is it that if I missed a day, I can no longer count with the bracha? Mentioned last night. This is a da'at yachid. There's one opinion in the Rishonim, that's the Bahag, because we're concerned for bracha levatala. He's the opinion who says you cannot count, you can no longer count. But really, Tosfot, most of the other Rishonim say you can carry on counting even if you missed. And therefore, says the Ktav Sofer like this. It says, out of deference to Bahag, if that's the only factor, I definitely didn't count yesterday. So, okay, we won't say a bracha, there's a chashash bracha levatala. But since most of the Rishonim and most authorities say, even if you missed the day, you can still count and you can still say a bracha. Therefore, if I have another factor to add to it, I have another mitigating circumstance, right? Chazil it's trufe. So then I can carry on counting and then I can carry on saying with a bracha. Says like Ktav Sofer, that's what's going on here. Not a sfeika, but it's the fact that, hey, according to most opinions, you could carry on counting anyway. And it may not even be the case that you missed. And therefore, that's enough. The combination of those factors is enough to allow you to carry on counting. Now, it sounds like maybe semantic, the difference between the two opinions. But the nafkamina that comes out of the Ktav Sofer is this. Any other case where I have other reasons and other mitigating factors for the fact that I didn't count to allow me to carry on saying a bracha, maybe I can still say a bracha, even though I don't have a sfeika. So what's one of the cases which are brought by the poskim? Very interesting case. So we know that in most places, the minhag is either the chazan gets up and says the bracha for sefira omer, or the rav of the keilah says the bracha for sefira omer. What happens if the rav forgot today? Well, believe it or not, rabbis are people too, and sometimes so the rabbi forgets. So on the one hand, the halakha is a person forgot a day. We say you forgot a day, you can't say the bracha anymore. On the other hand, you're saying it could be very, very embarrassing, could be not shayach, as they say about that. The rav is going to get up, he has to tell everybody. I actually once had a case. It was a friend of mine who was a rav in a certain kehillah somewhere, I won't say where, and he told me, he said it happened one year, he forgot. And therefore, he every other night after that, there was the practice. There's some places where they don't let the Rav make the bracha, just the Chazan or whoever it is, that's a different case. But he said that year, he felt that it was important for him that the Keilah understands that sometimes the Rabbi makes mistakes as well, and that you have to be makpid, and he thought it was appropriate in that case that he should not make the bracha. Okay. But other cases where it's not, it would be disparaging, it would be insulting, it would be embarrassing, whatever it is. So therefore, the poskim say, based on this Ktav Sofer, we could say that even if the Rav forgot, he can still carry on saying the bracha. Why? Because, like as we said, according to most opinions, even if you forgot, even if you skipped today, you can carry on saying it. What we learn from the case where there is a safek is not that we need a safek, not that we need a sfeika, but that we need another factor. Yeah, there's another factor that call it kvod habriot, call it the embarrassment, whatever it may be, and therefore a number of poskim say that even in such a situation, one would still be allowed to continue to say the bracha. Okay, there's another question which came up last night. Somebody asked, and he's not here tonight, so I hope he's watching on the Zoom. But the question would be like this. We said that if you forgot to count one night, so what's the solution? You say the count during the following day, and then you've counted during the day, and you can carry on saying a bracha the next day. So the question was as follows. A person forgot to count on Thursday night, and they forgot the whole day of Friday. They came to the early minyan, right? So you've said Kavalat Shabbat, and you've davened Maariv, and it's just before Aleinu L'Shabeach, and the Gavai gets up, it says, don't forget to count Sefira Omer when you, and Kriyat Shema, don't forget to count Sefira Omer when you get home after nightfall. And you say, oops, I forgot to count Sefira Omer last night. So what do you say? You say, well, I should say now, the day of today, and then I can carry on counting tonight with the bracha. But I've already accepted Shabbat. So is it the day or is it the night? Can I now at that point say the previous day's sefira in order to be able to continue counting with the bracha. So the truth is that this question, more of a question of Hilchot Shabbat than is a question of Sefirata Omer. It's fascinating. We've discussed in the past that the question here really is, what is the nature of Tosefet Shabbat? When a person takes on Shabbat early, and it doesn't have to be, an hour before the Plaga Mincha, whatever, any time before dark, before nightfall, we accept Shabbat. We have a mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbat. And there are two primary ways of looking at this in the Rishonim. Do we say that when I bring in Shabbat early, that I am extending the night, I'm extending Shabbat into the previous day? Or do I say, no, it's still Friday afternoon, still the day, Shabbat begins when Shabbat begins, but certain elements I'm adding in Isur Melacha, I'm adding in the obligation of the Tefillah, what I have to say, right? How do we look at it? And the answer to this question would really depend on that. So there are a number of proofs to show that one would it's still considered, even though I've accepted Shabbat, it's still considered daytime. Okay, the first one, maybe the most obvious, is the fact that we get up and we say, Kriyat Shema and Sefirata Omer of tonight, you still have to wait until nightfall. If I'm bringing in the night early, if I'm accepting Shabbat earlier, I can accept Isur Melacha whenever I want from Plaga Mincha, but I can't make it night. I still have to wait for nightfall for the purposes of the next night's Kriyat Shema and of the next night's Sefirata Omer. And therefore, that would be a strong reason to say that if I have to wait until night to count Sefirata Omer now, even though it's Shabbat, I could still count yesterday's now after I've accepted Shabbat. That is one. That's one. Another case which is brought, Shulchan Aruch brings this case. This actually happened to us. Is regarding a Brit Milah. What happens when a baby is born on Friday afternoon after you've already accepted Shabbat? This happened to us. Our first son was born at a time when everybody had accepted Shabbat. It was literally minutes before Shkia. It was on Friday. So it was in Yerushalayim, so we have the 40 minutes, but everybody's in the hospital, they've already lit candles, there's already Isur Melacha, everybody's davened, whatever it is, and the baby's born. So it's Friday afternoon, it's Shabbat, because everyone's accepted Shabbat, but it's before Shkia, so it's actually still the day. So then the halacha is that the Brit takes place so long as it actually was before Shkia, you know that. So Friday, it's counted that the baby was born on Friday, and the Brit will take place the following Friday. So it's interesting, one of those interesting cases that if the birth takes place let's say a few hours later, when it's definitely Shabbat, so then the Brit Milah will take place on Shabbat, because you have even when that's the 8th day. But if it was born earlier, in the time of Bein HaShmashot, so that's the time which is Safek Yom and Safek Laila, then even though the 8th day would be, so the Brit can't be on Friday because maybe the birth was on Shabbat, but the Brit can't be on Shabbat because maybe the birth was on Friday, and therefore the Brit would be postponed to Sunday. So depending on when the birth takes place, if it was earlier, the Brit would be on Sunday, and if it was later, the Brit would be on Shabbat. But either way, if the birth takes place, even though the fact that one has accepted Shabbat is inconsequential, the fact is that daytime is still day and night is still night. And therefore, at least regarding that case of Brit Milah, also we would say that it's still considered Friday. And therefore, for Sefirata Omer, it would be the same thing. That it sounds a little bit paradoxical, and is a little bit paradoxical. But if though one had already accepted Shabbat, one could still count the previous day's Sefira because it's still daytime, and then that night one could come and count Sefirata Omer, and therefore and continue saying a bracha. You might ask, based on that, so why is it, could one, the mincha, right? When we accept Shabbat, so sometimes you come, it doesn't happen here, but in some places where you get to mincha and it's very, very late, it's just before Shkia, you're going to fit, by the time you finish mincha, you're not going to be able to accept Tosefet Shabbat anymore because it's very, very close to mincha. So could you accept Shabbat first and then daven mincha? Generally speaking, I see your face. Generally speaking, we don't do that. We say, what do you mean? It's Tartei L'Safrei. Mincha is of Friday, and Shabbat comes afterwards. But if we're saying that even accepting Shabbat earlier on doesn't turn it into night, that you're accepting Shabbat, but it's still Friday day, so then maybe you could suggest that you could still have a mincha then. The answer is that we try not to do that because that's not appropriate. That's not kavod Shabbat. It's not kavod Shabbat to be davening a tefillah of chol when it's already Shabbat, even though it's still daytime. Just under extenuating circumstances, one would, there are poskim who allow for it. Even though one has accepted Shabbat, one could still have a mincha. But again, we preferably, at least like at Hila, we try and avoid that. One should rather daven a little bit earlier in order to still have time for the Tosefet Shabbat. Yeah. That's a That's a question. It's as well in terms of when you light the candles and when you daven. Yeah, we've discussed in the past as well.